Hello, this is Deb Johnson again with Our Time to Quilt. Today I am going to show you step 4 of the Jinny Beyer 2018 Mystery Block of the Month. So I had to do a little bit first. Let me take you and show you. The first thing I had to do was to take the border fabric and cut out the narrow borders. Now when this fabric comes to you, it comes with 4 narrow borders and 4 wide borders. Here are the wide borders, and they're all in one strip. You see how you cut them apart like this? And we want the narrow borders. So she said to start out this lesson, you must save the future borders, because if you don't save these and you cut and make a mistake, you won't have what you need to put a border on the quilt. So I've marked a baggie, I've cut, and I have starched these. They're ready to wait for that step. Now what we're going to need are, for this, we're going to need the remaining narrow borders. And what she wants us to do is, I think I showed you this pattern last time, and it's bigger than one printer sheet can handle, so they make it in 2 pieces. You line up the dotted lines and you put clear tape there. You make sure your arrow's even, so that way you know. And these, between the dotted lines lining up and the arrow, then you know you've got it exactly where it should be, because that's important for it all to fit. She wants us to cut 6B and 6BR. I told you last time that BR just means B reversed. So, and we have to line them up. And I'm going to take and draw a section of the pattern so that they all match. So, what I've got to what I've done here. Another thing I wanted to share with you. I tear the fabric. So I made a good nip, at least an inch long, because if you don't, it'll get kind of messy. It's hard to start tearing. But if you make a good 1-inch long cut and then start tearing, it tears perfectly on the straight of grain. Now they used to, I haven't been there in a year, but Jinny Beyer, when I would go buy fabrics, they would tear them. And if you ever get a chance and they still tear them, look behind the cutting table, because the threads on the floor are beautiful. All the different threads. That's the only problem that I notice from tearing, is you do get these threads. But just gently pull them off, gather them up, and toss them away. Unless you can use them for an embellishment project. But anyway, so I've cut the narrow stripes and I've pressed them with starch. Lately I like starching my fabrics because it just gives them that extra stiffness and makes my cutting and piecing more accurate. And starch, you can buy cans of spray starch. They aren't expensive. And if you'd like to save even more, buy bottled or liquid starch and thin it with water, put it in a spray bottle, you're set. Alright, now, so the other thing that we are going to cut, so we're going to cut 6 of these and 6 of these reversed, and it's really important to line the arrow up with a cutting line. So I'll come back to this and show you nice and close. Then she says on her instructions, which you get free online when you go sign up for her newsletter, and she'll send them and you can get all caught up. You can use your own fabric, or I found it very, very reasonable. I found her kit prices very reasonable, and I love her fabric with the choices she wanted, because there's nothing like it. Her shading is impeccable. So it says on here that you want fabric 10. Now when I first started making this mystery, some of these pages you print out might not be as accurate as the actual fabric. So what I do is I write the numbers again over here because I cut a swatch of each fabric and glue it on. And that way, because see, this is a separate fabric, separate, and these two are separate fabrics. So you see how close some of them can be, and it's better to have that little swatch. And I just glue it on with a little Elmer's glue, and it said fabric 10. So I look down here, there's fabric 10. I pull out fabric 10. Is that beautiful or what? Pull out fabric 10, and we're going to be using this template to cut these out. So let me get set up. But this, even though it takes time to prepare it, it saves you so much time in the end. So now, give me a moment to set this up.
Now the last time we used this narrow border,
with each written instruction, she also comes with a video where she shows you how to do each step. I love it.
I will show you on this one when we pull it.
I now have it set up, and I've watched the video carefully because it's so important with these templates to get them in the exact right place. One of the keys of Jinny Beyer Sewing is to make sure that all these patterns, these borders, line up just the way she wants. And I've showed you before, I love using the tailor's chalk. Look how easy it is to mark this. So I've marked it all along each side. I'm going to go through and mark these. I'm going to cut this off right here at this edge. And the reason I'm going to do that is so I don't keep rubbing the chalk off. But this is one piece that's marked. It'll be ready to cut in just a moment. Then I'll set this next piece up. One thing I forgot to do is to mark this design on the template so that I know where exactly to lay it for the next cut. And I just do enough lines to show me exactly what pattern I'm working with. Alright, do you see this? That's just a little registration line. That way when I go to lay it on this, I just know to line it up with this one right here. Do you see? Lining it up, and it matches perfectly. Then I bring this down. Alright, then I take my tailor's chalk, and that's what this is called. And you can find them for about $2 a piece, and some of them have little hand holders that you can use that actually will keep that edge nice and sharp. But what I like about it is the tailor's chalk. It's nice and firm, but the chalk comes off very easily. I like the yellow. As I get older, it's easier for me to see. But you watch this. You can see how easy. Whoops! Let me move back a little. It makes. See how makes the lines so easily. So it's very nice. All right. So now I'll trim this end. What I need to do is cut this off right along this top brown line, because she said make sure the dotted line meets the bottom line right here. This arrow goes right above the bottom line, and that way you're going to trim this off right along. And you know, I was started to do this with a rotary cutter, but I would have to get another thick ruler, and I thought, you know what, why don't I just do it by hand? In fact, I might sew one of these by machine, but one of the joys I have working on Jinny Beyer projects is doing them by hand. because, okay, now I've got to find that line here, and it's right along here. But I love sewing these by hand, and it really helps because when you're using borders, you have to make sure you're right along that line, or it's just not going to look good. I also want to send a note out to one of my people. One of my subscribers wants me to do another quilting video, and I want to do it better this time so that you can see exactly how I load it and watch me do some of the quilting. But there is a piece. Now this is a little long, but that's okay. I will know that when it comes time to cut. But as you can see, I've got this angle, I've got this angle, and I will be coming back and marking. The one thing I love about her templates is she has little dots where you can mark your stopping and starting sewing lines. And she'll have them on this piece and on the piece you sew this to. So here, you just cut along this. You know, one of the nice things about starching it is it sure does make it easy to cut. Okay, here's that other, here's the line where it starts to angle down, and I just cut. Alright, well, I don't want you to become bored watching me cut this, so I will pause this and catch up with the cutting. Alright, there's my second piece, and remember I need 6 this direction and then 6 reversed. So I will be showing you how to do the reversed the next time I pop back in. Alright. Mark went to go grab us some dinner, so I better hurry up and show you the other part of this. I have my B's cut out here. Now I'm going to do my BR. So I've got this on, and this still is in the right place. Because watch, see what if you read it upright, that's B. If you have to read it upside down, that's BR. It's really very simple. And I line this up here, doing the same thing, matching up the line down here. And then I'll take my tailor's chalk, run it along here, run it along, whoops, let me try that again. The fabric stretched out on me a little. Okay, and it's easy enough just to, I'll remember that inside line, and then mark it here. Oops, let me see. All right. Today I was watching the movie 1776. It's one of my all-time favorites. I remember going to see the movie with my family in the theater in 1972. Should I tell you how old I was then? I guess I was about 15, not quite 16. And it was such an amazing movie. I had never seen anything like it. I wasn't that used to musicals. You know, we had The Sound of Music and stuff, but it was very exciting. And the ending of that movie is so stirring, as one by one they come up to sign what could have been a death sentence for themselves. And at the end of the movie, the audience spontaneously jumped to their feet and applauded, gave a movie a standing ovation. And as you know, that doesn't happen very often, But I remember feeling so patriotic and so proud with that movie. And you know, right now I needed that, and so I am enjoying watching it. And I got some of the songs just buzzing around in my head. That Richard, the actor that portrays Richard Henry Lee, is hilarious. So I keep in my head singing the Aaliyah Lee song. So, okay. I think this... Yes. Aha, that's where I cut it. Alright. So now I line this up. Oh, can't quite go there, I don't think. It'd be nice, but now I'm going to lose that corner. And you know, the nice thing when I do a block of the month, I tend to slow down, take my time, and I do so much better of a job. So I cherish the block of the month because it is my time to try very hard to get each step just right. Alright, so I'm going to mark this. So you saw me do 2 of the B. Now this is 2 of the BR. I'll give a quick cut to this. And I think I'm going to take my camera upstairs with me tonight. Because I feel like after I eat dinner, when Mark gets home with dinner, we love Fast Food Friday. And we're not technically getting fast food. We're going up to the local little family-owned restaurant. And I'm getting a Pittsburgh steak salad, which I just felt in the mood. I tell you that in summer, my appetite drops because it's just hard to be hungry when it's hot outside. And I spent an hour and a half working in the garden this morning. So, alright. Alright. Pardon me if I ignore the phone. I can't stand all of these spam calls, and I feel pretty certain that's what it is. Okay. If it were somebody important, they'll leave a message. So, alright, so this is... Here it is. Alright, so now I have this one cut. So I've got 2 of this. I'll need 4 more of this direction. Now what I want to show you how to cut is template G. And it says on here that it wants this fabric to run because on some of these she tells you run it lengthwise, some of these she tells you run it crosswise grain. So this teal and blue fabric 10 arrow runs on lengthwise grain. Now I folded it in half because this isn't a directional piece. It is not. So whichever way I cut it, it looks the same. It is, these sides are the same length. So I'm going to place it here. And this is important. See this grain line? You cannot go like this. I know it's tempting to want to save the fabric and then you could come in here and you could put it like this and wow, you just can't. Because the grain line has to be parallel to the selvage. And what I'm going to do just to make sure I've got it set that way, because I'm cutting 2 pieces at once, I'm going to measure from the grain line, from the lengthwise grain arrow that she put on the pattern, to the tip of the selvage. Then I'm going to take a chalk line and draw it, and I can barely make out a little bit of a line. Then I'll move it up to here, and see if it's the same. And I am having a hard time. Let me grab a piece of tape. I can do the same thing with tape. All right. Alrighty. So I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna eyeball it where I think it is. Line up the edge of the ruler with the edge of the selvage, and right where this line is, put this tape. Then I'm gonna go up here to this end of the arrow and check. My eye was pretty good. I think I need to bring this back just a hair, but that was pretty good. All right. So now I know I have it running with the lengthwise grain. I'll come in here with my tailor's chalk, mark it, and look at that. Isn't that nice? All right, so I'm cutting 2 at a time. I know it looks like it should be more than 2 at a time, but this fabric's not the full width. And WOF is width of fabric. I'm cutting very carefully right on that line, not under it, not over it, just right on it. And whichever way you do, just make sure you're consistent and you know exactly how you cut it, because you don't want to add or subtract from that template size. Alright, cutting it. I try to cut that line right down the middle. Alright, so now I have 2, and I have to, let me see, I think she said I had to do 6 of these. Okay, so here are 2 of them. Alright, and here are the 2 triangles. Alright, now let's just see if I run it grain line. Can I, because I looked at the fabric, tell me what you think, but I think it's non-directional. I feel like it's pretty non-directional, pretty much looks the same either way. So what I need to see is, oh, I think I might be able to do it, but this time I measure from the fold. Okay, measure the line from the fold, pull the tape off, put the ruler right in line with the fold, then put the tape on right at the line of the arrow. Okay, so I've got it right there. Move it up to this end of the arrow, and I can do it. I just can do it. Let me check it one more time. Haha, that's wonderful. So I can save fabric and do it the right way. And that's always a good feeling. All right. Another beautifully drawn. Isn't that tailor's chalk nice? Now, keep your hands clean with it, or else get a holder to hold it, because the oils in your hands will make it become more hard and less usable with time. And I store mine in my tissue paper in the box it came in, and keep it in a drawer. You know the cute little packets that come in some things, especially electronics, that keep the moisture out? I keep those in all of my drawers of sewing supplies, because the last thing you want is a humid drawer where your pins or your scissors might want to rust. Also, I am working right now on my ironing. I am working right now on my ironing station, but I have turned my iron off and pushed it way out of the way. And let me tell you why. Has anyone else here accidentally set the iron on their cutting mat? Raise your hand. And let me tell you, you can never get those puppies to lay flat once you do that. There are some little methods, like put a towel on it. iron the towel, then put heavy flat weights on it and leave it for 24 hours. But boy, I don't think it ever has a memory, and I don't think it goes back the way it's supposed to. So now I have 4 of these, so I need to cut 2 more. And then I'll take the camera upstairs, and when it comes time for me to do some sewing, I will show you the Jinny Beyer method of hand sewing. Now, I really do. I took a class from Jinny herself, and she's an amazing hand sewer. And the only thing that I don't do that she does, she uses the tiniest little needle. And I have big hands, so my needle is smaller than what you'd think, but it's not as tiny as hers is. But she's amazing. She does all of her sewing by hand and quilting by hand. Alright, so I line this up. See how I'm doing it? Lining it with the edge of the selvage, because you can see it. And I put it right at this end of the arrow and mark the ruler. Then, holding this, I slide the ruler up to this end of the arrow. Okay, and I'm going to have to move it out a little. There. That is now on straight lengthwise of grain. Come in with my tailor's chalk. And I like cutting 2 out at a time. Just, you know, this, every part of quilting is gratifying. I really do enjoy it as a hobby, as a passion actually. But if I can cut the cutting time by half, then I will, because I can get more done. I can play even more. And isn't that what it's all about? So now I'm cutting this the last pair of these, so I will have 6. And I want to tell you too, I put all of my supplies neatly back away in the bag. The older I get, the less time I want to go looking around for something or have it all jumbled in together. So everything gets folded, put in order. It's just kind of nice. It's kind of fun. And I have the time I can do it now that I'm not raising kids. So children are for the young people. So anyway, now I'm going to fold this back up. I'm going to fold up my leftover stripes, put them back in the kit bag, nice and neat and tidy. And then when we go upstairs, I will show you. Well, while I'm right here though, let me do this. This is easier for me to do than when I'm upstairs on my, sitting in my recliner on my lap. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be putting these pieces, and now you see why you need a mirror image. So we're going to be putting these pieces together, and let me do it so you can see it even better. Here is the B piece. Here's the BR, and we'll be sewing and then pivoting and sewing down here. So I'll show you the rest upstairs. I hear Mark is home, so dinner has arrived. I love when he cooks. Hello, I'm back. I've gotten all my cutting done, and I've sewn a couple samples, and now I'm ready to show you what I do once I'm done cutting out the pieces of the pattern. So let me rearrange the camera, and I'll be right back. Okay, I am set up now with my sewing area. A couple things I wanted to show you. Anytime I'm doing a project, you remember that I cut out my border pieces, so I'll put that in a bag clearly labeled. And I save bags from all kinds of things, so I never have to buy them. Here are some specific pieces, nice pieces that were left over from the cutting. And here are some truly scrappy pieces. You see these? I always save every scrap of the quilt I'm working on until I am done with actually quilting it and binding it, because you just never know. After I've bound it, then I'll go ahead and put this in the scrap pile, or if the pieces are too small, throw them away. But Michelle will tell you, we have done block of the months before together, and if it weren't for the little scraps we saved, we would have been in a mess, because there was one quilt we made, we each took turn making mistakes. And so we would borrow each other's scraps and fix it. And it worked out really well. We could depend on each other to finish the block. So I wanted to just show you that. And then here are some of my favorite tools. This is a desktop needle threader. Always put your name and phone number on it. But desktop needle threader. Here is Thread Heaven. They don't make it anymore, but there's another company making one just like it. But I tell you what, everyone started hoarding these, and I've seen the prices. I paid $3 for this, but I've seen them as high as $30-some on eBay because people have hoarded it. I've got marking pencil, my pen cushion. My daughter Katie made this. Thanks, Katie. Look at this sweet little finger pen cushion. I bought this from the country store in Pennsylvania. You know, the one up near Lancaster. And it's beautiful. Someone turned the wooden base. It's absolutely beautiful. And I only paid a couple dollars for it. My favorite John James needles, especially if you can get them coated. My favorite thimble. It's a plastic thimble, and I need to do it again. But it's a plastic thimble. I like the, as I get osteoarthritis in these joints, it tends to hurt to put on a thimble. These are nice. They're cheap, number one. I believe Dritz makes them. And I can drop it in a cup of boiling water. Take the cup out of the microwave that's just boiled, drop it in, then get it back out with a spoon or something and then put it on my finger as soon as I can stand the heat. Let it cool on my finger. It will fit your finger so good. I've actually ended up in the shower washing my hair with the thimble still on, because it just becomes part of you and you get so comfortable with it. So here are some of my favorite tools, and I'm marking my dots with this tailor's chalk that I showed you when I was cutting it out. I decided I was using yellow first, but white tends to show up better on these. I have a marking pencil here, but the only problem is it's the color of lead, and it doesn't show up good on the dark blue. Alright, so, oops, I just unthreaded my needle. That's okay, because I have a needle threader. Now this pen's a little long. I told you before, Jinny Beyer uses a tiny little needle. She uses a between, which is normally a hand quilting needle, to do her stitching. My hands are a little large and I've not gotten comfortable yet. Whoops, okay. Let me get my glasses on, my second pair of eyes, and stick the needle in here. Pull the thread down to this little spot. Alright, and here it comes. My needle is threaded. Put that aside. Alright. So now I've got it tied. I'm going to coat it with Thread Heaven. Now normally I use a longer piece of thread. Some people say, most people say, just make it 18 inches at the longest, but I tend to be impatient, so mine runs a couple feet long. You do have to be careful so it doesn't get tangled. Then I lay the template back here. I had been marking them earlier, but I've handled them so much that the chalk can rub off. If any of you have a favorite pencil that tends to stay on longer, please share it with me down in the comments, because I'm always looking for marking pencils. Alright, so now I lift this off and you see the 3 points. Alright, I take one of these pieces, that is the B or the BR. Remember we talked about the reverse. And I thought this was going to go down here, but it doesn't. This is where it's always good to read directions, isn't it? Okay, so I put the right sides together. I match my dots right here. I put a little pin. Then I come down this end. I don't see this dot, so let me put it back on here, please. I'll do this one again too, just to make sure I have it. All right. There it is. Okay, so now I'm going to match this up. Match these two. There, and see how far you would think the dot would be down further towards this tip, but it's not. It's because it has to be 1/4 of an inch in from each side, this side and this side. And so that's how far back it lays. So that's why it's important to take time to make these marks. I am an impatient quilter, I'll be honest with you, but I have learned over time that being in too big of a hurry can waste you time in the long run and fabric. Okay. So I'm kind of just working this in gently and putting my pins. I showed you in another video, these were not one of my best buys. I consider these things little spikes because boy is the pen shaft thick. They're very good though for using for hanging stuff on walls. So they do come in handy for that, but they just punch a little too big of a hole for me. Alright. So, let me check this again. Yeah, I think that's in the right place. Okay. Alright, and when I get close to small places, I love using the little applique pens. Applique pens are good too because these have a definite head where thread can get caught. With an applique pen, it's just like a little teardrop, so the thread tends to just pull right off. Alright, now I'm going to move you in a little closer and I'll show you some of the stitching that I learned from Jinny Beyer, who in my opinion, she's the best. Now in the sewing pattern, it said to sew from the center, the narrow point to the wide point. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I peek in here again and see where the 1/4 inch mark is. Alright, and I take a little stitch. Then I come back and right in the middle of that stitch I stick the needle. So there's my little stitch. I start my next stitch right in the center of that stitch, and then I proceed out. Now I have my thimble on my finger back here so that I can grasp the fabric, and then I kind of hold. In fact, you can see the little, well, let me see if you can see it. There's a little slight indent where I tend to hold my needle, and then my first finger helps me hold that needle. Now people think you use the needle and you sew like this. No, you don't. What you do is the needle kind of stays still and my other hand brings the fabric up and back while I make the stitches. And see, I've got quite a few stitches on there. Then I take my thimble and I push the needle forward. I've learned not to use my first finger to push that needle because after sewing for a while, the back of the needle will go right into your finger. That's not fun. So now I'm going to do it again. Now, this is something that Jinny Beyer taught me. I can remove these applique needles. She taught me that when you pull the thread out, instead of advancing, go back a half a stitch and make a little locking stitch. Whoops, I'm not on camera. Okay, she taught me to go back a half a stitch like that, and that way you've made a little locking stitch. So what this does is it just keeps your stitches more secure. And you see me pushing the fabric back and forth. Now, if I hadn't been quilting and hand sewing for 40 years or 30 some years, I would probably draw a line for the 1/4 of an inch. And it wouldn't be hard to do. Okay, so I was showing you, I've been doing hand sewing for 30 some years, but I just thought I'd show you. Do you see my stitching and the 1/4, these dotted lines are the 1/4 inch measurement. So, you know, your eyeball gets really good. In fact, I always think it's kind of fun because somebody will have a certain thing and I'll say, oh, I know how that's 2.5 inches, and it will be. But let's say that you are not confident to judge the 1/4 of an inch mark. Then what you can do is you can take, you see your dark edge of fabric, and you put the dotted line, you can see through, put the dotted line even with the outside of the fabric, then take your tailor's chalk, make sure, and just go right along the edge of the template. Now, how easy is that? And you know what? I just realized something. I'm stitching from the wrong side, so let me move it over to the other side, and I'll show you why. Now, this is going to mean I have to sew upside down, I think. I'm left-handed, so I am sorry that I kind of show you backwards, but the reason I want to sew from this side is because I want to follow this line. As I'll show you in a minute, let me go back. So actually on this one, the 1/4 of an inch isn't important. When you fold this fabric out, you want the brown line to be right up against the blue, like this. Whoops. You want that brown line. See how it's right up against the blue. So, in a case like this, whether you're sewing by machine or by hand, you want to stitch it right, not on the brown line. Because remember, fabric needs a thread or so to turn and to lay flat. Okay. So here I go, and I'm sewing. You know what? I'm not going to be comfortable doing it this way. I'm going to knot off. This is a good time for me to show you how I knot off. I take, let me see, okay, so I've got the thread coming out of the fabric. I take the needle and I just run around and go under the thread so I make that knot. Then I slide my fingers down to the base of the knot and hold, and the knot makes right at the base of the fabric. I do it again, and 2 knots width are sufficient. Okay, now let me trim this, and let me do this from the beginning. Okay. Actually, you know what I just got thinking? She did want me to sew. That's why I was sewing wrong. Because she wanted me to sew from here and go up. But being left-handed, sorry, doesn't work for me. So I have to, that's why I was sewing on the wrong side. I was trying to follow directions. But us left-handers, it's kind of like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. We do everything you right-handers do, just backwards. Although I don't have heels on today. But In fact, if you are ever trying to learn from a left-hander, sit across the table, because then you see them the correct direction. If you stand over their shoulder, it's all going to look backwards. But if you sit across the table from them, and that's how I teach. I teach my right-handers across the table. Then it doesn't look so strange. Well, hopefully not. Can't tell with me. Alright, so I've gone just behind the stitch, and then remember the needle stays pretty still, and your fingers on the other hand rock back and forth to bring the thread up onto the needle. So right here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, and then I take my thimble, push it through, and then pull it. Now I have noticed sometimes this finger gets a little chewed up because the needle often kind of pokes it, and that's my way of making sure the stitch went all the way through the back too. See my stitches? And also understand, I used to work at St. Mary's City, historic St. Mary's City, making costumes, and everything that showed had to be done by hand. So please remember, I've been doing hand stitching since 1988, and so if your stitches aren't as small, please, this is not a contest. It's just something that I have learned to do over the years. Whoops, okay, here we go. So I started again right before there, and this finger just goes 1, 2, 3. Whoops, I went too far, so I'm pulling back. 4. Okay, this is actually 5 counting my first one, so that's all I'm usually comfortable loading on a needle. And be careful of that too. You don't know how many times I have stuck my thumb with the needle. Alright, then I go back right before that last stitch, so I'll lock it in and just push the fabric on the needle, pull it through, then always kind of stretch it just a little. And let me tell you, it is amazing. I can't get my hands comfortable here. I'm holding it out so you can see it under the camera, but it's not normally where I hold it. Normally I would hold it, well, maybe I can do a little bit better here. But normally, well, now I unthreaded the needle. Normally I do this in the evening sitting in the recliner in front of the television, and that way I enjoy spending my time with Mark and working on this. Another thing to tell you is why I'm hand sewing it. And you can see my eyes are getting older. And wear your sunglasses. I'm getting cataracts. It's not fun. I did not grow up. I grew up at Virginia Beach. Not wearing sunglasses. Not a smart thing. So I remember talking about vision and the fact that you should wear sunglasses every time you're outside. But I remember working at St. Mary's City, and I had a volunteer sewing group to help me make the costumes. I had 26 living history people that I had to outfit, and they worked in the clothing, so they weren't really costumes. But I remember showing them how to make a braided button, or actually a woven button, and some of them were saying, I can't see it. And I remember thinking that was the oddest thing. I couldn't imagine not being able to see. I was always blessed with extraordinary vision. I mean, I was 2015, so, and even now, for my age, it's not bad, but I love my reading glasses. I hang them on my neck because I just can't read anything without them, and I hate that feeling. And I love reading too. So nicely now I have a nook so I can make the letters larger and adjust the brightness, and that helps tremendously. Right, okay, so hopefully you kind of see that hand stitching really is pretty easy. And it doesn't have to take very long either. In fact, I've watched Jinny Beyer. She is so good at hand stitching. She hand stitches and hand quilts all of her quilts. And that way she can quilt wherever she is, with whatever time she has here and there. Because honestly, I always keep a little pack of hand sewing ready when I go to a doctor's appointment or anytime I might have to wait, especially when I ride in the car if Mark's driving, then I'm stitching. And now I'm going to knot off. So this is what I usually do. I take and make a little loop. Then I run the needle under the loop of thread. Then I lay it down and I do that thing where I put the needle under the loop, put my finger on it and pull, and I'm going to do a second one. And I never have my seams come undone. I know what I was going to tell you. There was something else I was going to tell you. And that is what threads I use. The threads you use totally depends on your own personal choice. I grew up with Coats & Clark. I love Coats & Clark. I now buy the Coats & Clark XP all-purpose. And if you look here at my quilt rack, do you notice something? Now I do have some colors back behind the monitor there, but here it's all grays and beiges. And the reason I showed you that is because I sew with all neutral threads. And to me, it's just easier and calmer. I don't have to worry about it. It's a lot less expensive because, you know, buying a spool for just a little bit of sewing, you know, I started out sewing clothing and you always had to match your threads. And honestly, I remember by the time you bought the pattern and the thread and the zippers and the buttons, and you spent as much on notions as you did the fabric. And that always confused me. But anyway, I just buy neutrals. And since this, I try to match my thread to the darkest fabric. And so you'll see here, look how it disappears almost. And this, trust me, this is a dark gray thread, but gray is, oh, I love gray. It's my friend. It is a perfect neutral. And what you want is not necessarily for a thread to match. You want a thread to not show up. You want it to blend. So, and in fact, if I were to pick out a blue-green, a teal, to go with this, I would choose the darker color because a lighter color is going to show up anyway. But I just use a neutral, and that way, look, it's no more obtrusive on this fabric as it is the dark fabric. So I love gray. XP thread, I can afford it. It's a good quality thread, been around since the 1800s, I believe. And I just like it. Okay, I'm going to show you how I make a knot on the end of my thread. And as you can see here, I've got at least 2 feet of thread with a good long tail. Okay, I take my thread and I lay it on my finger. Let me zoom in again so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, take this thread, I lay it on this first finger. I lay the needle on it, transfer it to this finger. Then I wrap it about 4 times. Okay, so it's wrapped 4 times. Then I grab the wrapped thread, pull the needle through the top, holding firmly on that thread, letting the thread go through to the end. Then I take my fingernails and kind of give it a little tug, and there I go. I have a little knot. Now this knot has a little loop on it, but that doesn't matter. I can pull it like that. Now I don't like a tail this long, so I trimmed the tail down to about 1/8 of an inch. So now I take my thread heaven, and this is just silicone. It's a little hunk of silicone, and I hold it on top of the silicone and run it through twice. There we go. It just conditions it. It makes it glide through the fabric easier. The reason that's a good thing is it keeps it from roughing up or fraying the thread. And I never have a thread break on me as I'm sewing. Because if you think of how many times this thread goes in and out of these other threads, that's a lot of wear and tear. Now I start it behind my last stitch, and then off I go. Now if I were starting it from scratch, I would stop and make a loop, but since I was starting behind another established thread, then I got confused because I thought, okay, here I'm stitching and I'm coming up on stitching, and I forgot that I had started on the other side. So what I'm going to do is meet up with that thread. There I am. I've met up with it now. And I'm going to check and see how good I did. Did I follow closely enough? And I think I'm just going to finish stitching all the way down. It only takes 10 or 15 seconds, so it's not a big deal. So, okay. Let's see. I get only 2 threads away from that brown line. Okay, come back before the stitch. Some people feel like that hand stitching is not as sturdy as machine. Well, if your stitches are small enough, and if you come back and do that locking stitch every time, then it is just as sturdy. I've never I've tried to count my stitches. I try to do at least 9 stitches to the inch, which is about what I would do on my sewing machine. So, and what makes a small stitch is don't have as short a needle as you can handle, and then push the fabric towards the needle. Okay, so see, I just lifted it. It's kind of rocking the fabric over the needle. All right, so there's that. I'm gonna go ahead and make a knot. And remember, I just do a loop, hold my finger at the bottom of the loop and pull, and I do 2 of those, and then I know my knot is secure. All right, then nip the thread at about 1/8 of an inch. Now I'll take out my pins and show you what I've got and how I decided to iron. All right, so let me zoom out. All right, here is what I've sewn, and I have decided to iron it facing this way. So actually my dark, it's going out. And how I decided that is because of this junction down here is just going to be too tight to try to come towards the center, and I have another one coming towards the center. And what I do at this point, when I'm hand sewing, I'm usually not near an ironing board, but I finger press. And you could even just, anything you have handy, bottom of your scissors or the side, and it's just a matter of just creasing it. But you see where I tried to stay very close to that brown line. So here is the area that we cut to make mirror images. Now I'm going to grab the other side for the mirror image, and this is how it fits. And I would have thought that somehow this cut edge was supposed to be here, but no, what makes this so exciting, this goes up here, and the mirror image, you pin it so that it matches perfectly. So this will match perfectly. So I've got to take time to pin it very carefully. I'll show you here. All right. Yep, I barely see my chalk line right there, and I match it to right there, and you'll notice the tips stick out a little bit. That's absolutely fine. And you don't have to take my word for any of this. Jinny did a beautiful video. Every time she releases a clue, she also releases a video where she shows you how to do this. How lucky. So, take these shorter pins and just pin it with the top edges even. Alright, let's see. Alright, and then I'm going to sew it down to this point. We use an applique needle because it's a little narrow down there. And she normally, now this side I can sew from here out. And I'm not going to show you how to sew this on a machine because I think you know what to do, and most of you do all of your quilting by machine. But if I did, you don't worry about these parts. You just do these edges first. And accuracy is very important here. Alright, so I pull my thread, my fabric, get the other piece out of the way, get ready to start. I take one stitch. It helps to knot it. I totally forgot to knot it. Alright, so you can lay it on that finger. I'll go ahead and just put the needle on the thread, like that. Wrap it 4 times. Now this is, you have to be careful. I pull it down so I don't lose it. Transfer it to that hand and pull it down to the end. And there's my knot. Pretty nifty, huh? Alright. I'm going to bring you in closer again. Alright. Now. I make a stitch. Come back on the other side of that stitch. Okay. I'm getting into position here. I'm going to run right above 2 threads, above, like right here, above that brown line. So you need that 2 threads to turn it, iron it. That fabric is stiff. I starched my fabric. I might have put a little bit much in here. Alright, here I go again. Now I'll be zipping through here. You don't need to watch me stitch the whole thing. So I'll probably speed it up. Alright, here I have the other side done. Not bad. Alright, now comes the tricky part. And it's not tricky if you just take your time. What I'm going to do is line up these lines, these brown lines, because then I know the fabric is even. So if I were to fold it back, see how I have those brown lines even. Okay, put a pin in. Then they've run off the fabric now. So now what I do is take this little part of the design and match it to that little. That looks good. Then I come down here and make sure these two line up. See? They line up. Put a pin in there. This is why it's so important to mark it, draw it correctly. See there? Draw it correctly, mark it correctly, pin it meticulously, and then you'll really like what you have. So far, it's lining up beautifully. You can't just look at the brown lines. You have to, at this point, since these little patterns are going to come together, you've got to make sure that you've got those patterns right in the same place. And that means if like here, I must have cut a little crooked because they don't match. See how you can see that fabric? But it's too important. Match the pattern. Don't worry about the top edges. Match the pattern. Alright. So now I'm going to knot my thread again. Normally I've gotten into a habit that the moment that I cut my thread from cut a knot, tied off, I get used to making a new knot immediately before I set my needle down or put it in my pincushion. And that way I don't have to think when I pick up my fabric. I put it right at the 1/4 inch dot. Then I just start stitching. Okay, I have sewn the entire piece, and remember I'm pushing these seams away from the triangle. Then these I'm just pushing to one side as it goes down the tail. Alright. What do you think? I think it looks pretty good. And now it can join the others that I've made. And by my count, there are 6 to be made. I have 2 left to go. So that's all for the sewing for this time. These I'll take upstairs and sit with Mark and enjoy the process. That's one thing they talk about now. It's not just how fast you sew. It's if you enjoy the process. And I truly do enjoy the hand sewing process. So I'm going to clean up my stuff and tell you goodbye. Until the next video, which I'm going to do one this week. I've got some fun ideas, so I will be seeing you back here. I hope you've enjoyed part 3 of the 2018 Jinny Beyer Mystery Block of the Month. I'll see you in August for part 5. Bye-bye.